I never thought the strangest thing about that Sunday would be the fact that my best friend wasn't even home. Liam and I have been inseparable since freshman year. He's the kind of friend who shows up at 2 a.m. with tacos when your heart's, wow, been broken by a midterm, or worse, a guy you never told him about. That's just who he is. Loyal, loud, effortless. His house became a second home to me, not because of its size or charm, but because of the way I could breathe easier when I was there. No questions, no judgment, just a couch with my name on. It and a fridge I was allowed to raid. Liam's dad, Mr. Morgan, was always part of that background, like the steady hum of a ceiling fan you forget is even running. Polite, friendly, a little too observant maybe, but never inappropriate. Never the center of my attention. Until that Sunday. I was halfway through my junior year, balancing a part-time job, buried under essays, and quietly suffocating in the closet I kept boarded up with sarcasm and well-placed jokes. I told myself I was too busy to think about dating. Truth was, I was too afraid. That morning, Liam had texted me to come over for the game, as usual. But when I got there, he wasn't around, just his dad. The game was already on. Beer was already opened. It should have been awkward, and for a moment it was. But then something shifted. Maybe it was the way Mr. Morgan smiled a little longer that day, or how he asked questions that felt deeper than casual small talk. Maybe it was the fact that, for once, someone looked at me like they saw through me, like they recognized something I hadn't fully admitted to myself. I don't know when I stopped thinking of him as just my friend's dad. I only know that by the time the final whistle blew on the screen, something else had started, something I wasn't ready to name, something I still can't forget. It started like any other lazy Sunday. Liam shot me a text that morning around 10. Game at 4. Come over. Don't flake. I never did. Sunday games had become a kind of ritual for us. Pizza, trash talk, and pretending we knew more about football than the coaches on screen. It was comforting, predictable, easy. Something I could rely on while everything else in my life felt like a moving target. So I showed up around 3:45, clutching a six-pack and a bag of chips, expecting the usual. Instead, I got a text just as I was walking up the front steps. Dude, sorry. Mom's got me driving up to my aunt's for the day. Total surprise. Still go in. Dad's home and expecting you. Don't be weird. I stared at the message like it was in a different language. Still go in? I didn't really know Mr. Morgan. Sure, I'd exchanged pleasantries with him over the years. Hey, Mr. Morgan. Nice grill work, Mr. Morgan. Tell Liam to stop eating all the snacks, Mr. Morgan. But we'd never been alone. Not once. And now I was supposed to just hang out with him. I rang the doorbell anyway, hoping maybe he hadn't gotten the memo. But he answered right away, wearing a fitted navy t-shirt and casual jeans, barefoot, a bottle of beer already in hand. He smiled wide, easy. His hair was still damp from a recent shower, swept back in that effortlessly cool kind of way I could never pull off. Jamie, he said, like we were old friends. Liam told me you were coming. Come on in. I almost turned around, almost mumbled some excuse. But then he stepped aside, and the smell of popcorn and cold beer drifted out, and something about the casual confidence of the moment made it harder to say no. So I went in. The living room looked the same as always. Big couch, massive TV, the faint hum of crowd noise from the pre-game coverage. But the energy felt different. We sat a cushion apart on the couch. He offered me a beer. I took it. We started watching. And gradually the awkward silence gave way to something else. He was funny. Like, actually funny. Dry, clever, a little self-deprecating, and way more relaxed than I expected. He made a sarcastic comment about the referee's hair, and I laughed harder than I should have. Then I fired back with something about his fantasy team being a disaster, and he clutched his chest like I'd mortally wounded him. We ribbed each other. We got loud. We cheered for the same team. Somewhere in the second quarter, I forgot I wasn't supposed to feel comfortable. And then, out of nowhere, I caught him watching me, not in that parental supervision kind of way, in that quietly studying kind of way, like I was something he hadn't expected either. There's a softness in his smile, I remember thinking, that didn't match the beer, the jersey, or the game on the screen. We talked more during halftime, about school, about life. He asked questions Liam never did, about my major, my plans, whether I was happy. I told him I wasn't sure, that I felt stuck, drifting. He didn't try to fix it, just nodded, like he understood in a way that made me feel less alone. By the time the game hit the final quarter, I wasn't sure what had changed, only that something had. The lines were blurring. Mr. Morgan was still Liam's dad, still older, still off limits, and yet, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to hide the person I was beneath all the layers. That feeling scared me more than anything else, but it also made me stay. The second half of the game kicked off, but I barely noticed the ball. Something had shifted, not just in the room, but in me. The banter between Mr. Morgan and me hadn't just lightened the mood, it had chipped away at the invisible wall I kept between myself and most people. The one I built to keep questions out and secrets in. I'd only meant to survive the afternoon. Awkwardness, maybe enjoy a beer and dip before heading home. But here I was, still rooted to the couch like something important was unfolding, and it had nothing to do with touchdowns. The game commentary buzzed in the background, a distant hum to our conversation. "So," Mr. Morgan said during a lull, turning slightly toward me, "what's the plan after college?" I gave a half smile. Graduate, panic, and hopefully figure out how to be an adult before my student. Loans start breathing down my neck. He chuckled, low and warm. Ah, the classic strategy. There was something about his tone, gentle, curious, not like the probing questions from professors or the performative concern from relatives over holiday dinners. He wasn't asking out of obligation. He actually wanted to know. I shrugged. Honestly, I don't know. Everyone else seems to have it figured out. I feel like I'm still watching the trailers before the main feature. He nodded slowly. That feeling doesn't always go away. I'm 43 and sometimes I still wonder if I'm living someone else's life. That surprised me. I glanced at him and he smiled, almost wistfully. "You seem like you have it together," I said. He leaned back on the couch, stretching one arm across the backrest, close, too close to my shoulders. "I'm good at making it look that way." We fell into a silence, not uncomfortable, but thick with something unspoken. The kind of quiet that has weight to it. Like neither of us wanted to be the first to name what was happening. Another touchdown lit up the screen. We clapped, instinctively, and our arms bumped. His hand lingered against my forearm, just a second longer than it should have. My breath caught, just for a moment. But I said nothing, laughed it off. Shifted my focus back to the screen like I hadn't felt that small electric charge. Like my skin hadn't noticed his touch in a way it absolutely shouldn't have. "You're not seeing anyone, are you?" he asked suddenly. The question hit like a missed tackle. I blinked. No. Not right now." He nodded, eyes on the screen again. "Neither am I." I waited for him to elaborate. He didn't. So I did. "By choice?" He gave a small laugh. Dry, with a trace of something heavier beneath. "Not really. After the divorce, well, let's just say it's hard to start over. When you don't know where you're supposed to begin." I turned to look at him. "That sounds lonely." His gaze met mine. "Yeah, sometimes it is." There was another pause, a silence where he looked at me like I was something he was trying to figure out. Or remember. It wasn't just my imagination, was it? No. That look, quiet, intense, searching, wasn't nothing. And it lingered. I guess. I've just been waiting for someone to make me feel like I wasn't stuck, he said softly. The room felt warmer. Or maybe that was just me. I nodded slowly, heart thudding louder than the game's roaring crowd. Yeah, I know that feeling. Another. Silence. Only this one didn't feel awkward. It felt suspended, like something was on the verge of happening if one of us dared to move. His hand was still on the back of the couch, inches from my shoulder. I became hyper-aware of every detail. The faint scent of his cologne, the worn softness of his shirt, the way his chest rose and fell slowly as if he was trying to steady himself too. A laugh from the crowd on the screen pulled us out of it. He leaned forward and grabbed the remote, lowering the volume. The silence returned, deeper now. I probably shouldn't be talking to you about this stuff, he said, more to himself than to me. Why not? I asked. He looked over, hesitated. Because you're Liam's friend. I tried to swallow the weight in my throat. Yeah, I guess that's all I am. He turned to face me fully now. Is that what you want? That question. It was like he'd peeled back everything I'd worked so hard to keep hidden. I couldn't answer. Not yet. I just sat there, staring at the flickering light from the TV, pretending like the silence between us didn't feel louder than the game. But inside, something had undeniably shifted, a spark, unexpected, inconvenient, and impossible to ignore. The game had just hit overtime when the power went out. A sudden pop in the distance, the TV cut to black, and the house fell into a surprising, dense silence. No buzz from the speakers, no hum from the ceiling fan, just the creak of settling, walls and our collective breath. Well, Mr. Morgan said, glancing around as if checking for ghosts. So much for the final quarter. I let out a shaky laugh, too aware of how close we still sat, how the dimming room made everything feel more intimate. Maybe the universe knew it was getting too intense. He raised a brow, smirking. The game? I didn't answer. A few minutes later, he returned from the kitchen with 2 large candles, setting them on the coffee table, their flickering light stretching shadows across the walls. Then he disappeared again and came back with a bottle of wine, deep red, dusty from the cabinet, and 2 glasses. No pressure, he said as he poured. Just seems like a wine by the fire kind of night now. The power outage had cooled the house slightly, and Mr. Morgan took the opportunity to light the gas fireplace. Within minutes, soft amber flames crackled to life, chasing away the chill. I found myself drawn to the floor in front of it, cross-legged on the rug, nursing the wine he handed me. He sat beside me, not too close, not too far. For a while we sipped in silence, the fire filling the room with warmth and a quiet intimacy I wasn't used to. I wasn't sure if it was the wine or the dark or something that had been building long before the lights went out. But the air felt heavier. Now? Thicker? He broke the silence. You ever feel like you're always waiting for permission to be who you really are? The question startled me. I looked over, and he was staring into the flames, jaw tense, eyes distant. All the time, I said quietly. He nodded, like he'd known my answer before I spoke. I was married for 17 years, he said. Not unhappily. At least not at first. But after a while, I stopped recognizing myself in the mirror. I watched him, unsure if I should say something. So I didn't. I just let him speak. She was great. Liam's mom. Still is. But we were pretending. Both of us. And pretending gets exhausting. There was a long pause. He took a slow sip of wine, then turned to look at me. I see you, Jamie. I've seen the way you carry yourself. The careful pauses. The walls. I know what those feel like. My chest tightened. My mouth opened and closed again. I'm not trying to assume anything, he added quickly, gently. I don't know. I didn't want to be another adult who looks the other way. I swallowed hard. It's not easy. No. It's not. We sat with that. The fire crackled. The shadows danced across his face. And when I turned to look at him again, our eyes caught in a way that didn't feel accidental. I felt my heart in my throat. He leaned slightly forward. Not invading, just nearing. His hand rested beside mine on the rug, not quite touching. He was close enough now that I could smell the faint, woody scent of his aftershave, could see the soft lines at the corners of his mouth when he breathed. I don't want to make you uncomfortable, he said. Say the word, and I'll back off. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because all I could think was, I want this. Even if it was wrong. Even if I shouldn't. And then he leaned in. Not fast, not dramatic. Like he was asking a question, not making a statement. I met him halfway, because maybe I needed to answer it too. His lips touched mine, soft, searching. It wasn't the first time I'd kissed a man, but it was the first time I didn't want to stop. His hand came to rest gently on my cheek, thumb brushing along my jaw, anchoring me in the moment. I let myself lean into it, every nerve ending alight with something I couldn't name. Fear, desire, freedom. The kiss deepened for a moment, a warm ache building in my chest. Then we broke apart slowly, breathing quietly in the dark. Neither of us spoke for a beat. The fire flickered. I started, then stopped. You okay? He asked softly, his forehead still resting lightly against mine. I nodded, though my thoughts were a hurricane. Yeah. I didn't think this would happen. Neither did I. He sat back slightly, giving me space, eyes searching. Mine for regret. There wasn't any, only the quiet terror of realization. That something real had happened. That a line had been crossed. And I wasn't sure I ever wanted to go back. I woke up on the couch, wrapped in the same blanket I'd curled under during the game, though the television was still black, the fireplace now cold. Morning light slipped in through the slats of the blinds, soft and gray, the kind of muted glow that blurred edges and made everything feel a little less real. My mouth was dry. My heart was louder than it should have been. For a moment, I wasn't sure if I'd dreamed it all, but then I shifted and felt it. That low ache in my chest, the weight of something too heavy to be imagined. The wine glass still sat on the coffee table. The candles had burned low, and the spot next to me on the rug, where we'd sat so close, was now just carpet again. Empty. My shoes were by the door. I hadn't even taken them off. I was still fully dressed, and yet I felt completely exposed. In the kitchen, I heard the faint clink of a spoon against ceramic, then the sound of a kettle whistling softly. I sat up slowly. Every movement felt like it echoed. Mr. Morgan stood at the stove, back turned, pouring hot water into 2 mugs. His posture was relaxed, casual, like nothing had happened. Or like everything had, and he wasn't ashamed of it. Morning, he said without turning around. I cleared my throat. Morning. You drink coffee, right? Yeah, I replied, though I didn't really want any. What I wanted was clarity. Rewind. Maybe to crawl inside my own skin and disappear for a few days. He set one of the mugs down on the island and leaned back against the counter, arms folded, watching me without pressure. You doing okay? The question was too gentle. It made my throat tighten. Yeah, I think so. I stood up too fast and nearly tripped over the blanket. I caught myself, muttered something, tried not to meet his eyes. He didn't say anything for a moment. Just nodded like he was trying not to spook me. You don't have to explain anything, he said softly. And I'm not expecting anything. I just wanted to make sure you were all right. I ran a hand through my hair, pacing aimlessly for a moment like I didn't know how to exist in the space anymore. I could still feel the phantom pressure of his lips on mine. Still feel the weight of that silence afterward. I started, then stopped. This was a mistake. He didn't flinch. If that's how you feel, I'll respect it. I hated that he wasn't angry. I hated that he wasn't defensive. It would have been easier if he'd made it easy to walk away. But he didn't. He just looked at me with quiet understanding, like he'd already made peace with what it cost to be honest. I don't even know who I am, I admitted, my voice barely audible. I don't know what this means. For me. For Liam. For everything. Mr. Morgan looked down at his mug, nodding slowly. It doesn't have to mean everything right now. Silence again. He wasn't pushing. That made it worse. He finally said, "What happened was real, Jamie, and you don't have to run from that." I think that's when I realized I mumbled something about needing to get back, that I had an early study session, that I didn't want Liam to ask questions. It was all a mess of half-truths and cowardice. Mr. Morgan nodded. Okay. I grabbed my keys, shoes on, door unlocked, and then I hesitated. He wasn't chasing me. That somehow made it harder to leave. Maybe I wanted him to. Maybe that would have made me feel less like I was abandoning something that had just begun to make me feel seen. I opened the door. The morning was cold and bright and too real. "Thank you," I said, almost too quietly to hear. He just nodded, again sipping his coffee, not moving from the kitchen as I stepped outside. I didn't look back. I was afraid if I did, I wouldn't leave at all. I didn't go back to Liam's house, not the next weekend or the one after that. When he texted to ask if I was coming over to catch the game, I lied and said I had a group project, then a family dinner. Then I just stopped answering for a while. He didn't push, which made the guilt worse. I started dating a girl named Heather from my sociology class. She laughed at all the right moments, liked the same weird indie bands I did, and called me James, like she was trying to turn me into someone more polished, more sure of himself. For a while I let her. I took her to coffee shops, kissed her at parties, posted a photo of us together on my story like it was proof of something. Proof that I was fine, that I was normal, that nothing happened that night by the fire. But it had, and it wouldn't leave me alone. I'd be sitting across from Heather at some crowded bar and suddenly hear Mr. Morgan's voice in my head, low and steady, asking if I was okay. I'd see the way he looked at me in the candlelight, like he was seeing something I hadn't even admitted to myself. And I'd feel sick, because I was lying, to her, to myself. I tried to kiss her once when I wasn't drunk. Just a quiet moment. Outside her apartment, no noise, no music. And all I could think was, this isn't it. I broke things off the next day, told her it wasn't her, because it wasn't. She nodded like she'd expected it, gave me a half smile and said, "Good. Luck figuring it out." That hurt more than I expected. I spent more time in my dorm room after that, kept my headphones on, skipped the usual Friday night hangouts, and Liam noticed. He cornered me outside the student union one afternoon, holding 2 coffees and wearing a look of mild concern that bordered on brotherly frustration. "You dying or something?" he asked, handing me one of the cups. "Just tired," I lied. Again. He narrowed his eyes. "You've been tired for a month." "I've had a lot on my mind." He walked with me in silence for a while, the campus loud with the noise of spring, skateboards clacking, someone blasting music through a speaker, girls laughing too loud by the fountains. "Is it about someone?" he asked finally. I froze. Just slightly, but he noticed. "I'm not asking to pry," he added quickly. "Just, you've been different, and not in a moody art student kind of way." I almost told him. Almost opened my mouth and let the truth tumble out like broken glass. But I couldn't. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I was terrified of what it would change. So I said nothing. Just sipped the coffee, nodded, and muttered something about being fine. Liam didn't push, just sighed and said, "Okay, but I'm around, all right? Even if you're being weird." He smiled, and it hurt. Later that night, lying in bed with my phone screen casting shadows on the ceiling, I scrolled up to the last message I got from Mr. Morgan. It was just a simple line, sent the morning after. "You don't have to run from it." I'd left it unread. Pretended it hadn't happened, but I read it now, over and over. I kept waiting for time to make it go away. Instead, it made everything sharper. I told Liam I was going home for the weekend. It wasn't entirely a lie. Just not the home I assumed. I parked a few houses down and walked the rest of the way. The familiar ache in my stomach returned the second I saw the Morgan house. Still quiet, still neat, still humming with the kind of normalcy that didn't match the storm in my chest. I stood at the door for what felt like 10 minutes before, finally knocking. He answered almost immediately, like he'd been waiting on the other side. He looked the same, messy hair, slight stubble, a hoodie and jeans. Only his eyes had changed, like they'd been carrying something for a while. "Hey," I said, "Jamie." He stepped aside without a word. I entered slowly, half expecting the house to feel different somehow. But it didn't. It was exactly the same, and that made it harder. He led me to the kitchen, motioned to the bar stool I always used, and poured me a glass of water before sitting down across from me. No wine this time, no fire, just light from the afternoon sun filtering through the windows. "I wasn't sure if you'd ever come back," he said. I wasn't sure either. Silence. Then, "I've been doing a lot of thinking," I admitted, trying to pretend that night didn't matter, that it was just weird timing, or a mistake. He didn't respond right away. He let the words settle. "Let me be uncomfortable with them first, and?" he finally asked. And I couldn't pretend, not really. It followed me. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, me too." I met his eyes for the first time since walking in. I was scared. Still am. I know. I thought maybe if I stayed away long enough, it'd fade. But it didn't. And I realized I didn't come here for answers. I came because I needed to say it out loud. He tilted his head slightly, curious. Say what? That night, I felt more like myself than I ever have. Something shifted in his face then. Not surprise, just something softer, like permission. "I don't want to complicate your life," he said. "That's never been my intention. If anything, I've spent weeks wishing I could take the weight of it off your shoulders. You didn't force me into anything. I know. But I'm still older. Your best friend's dad. That's not nothing." I nodded, letting the words land where they needed. "I guess I just needed to know you weren't pretending it didn't happen," I said. "I'm not. And I'm not either." We sat there, two men in different stages of their lives, connected by something that didn't make logical sense, but felt like truth anyway. It wasn't just attraction. It was recognition. Like he saw a version of me I hadn't dared admit existed. There was no kiss this time. No reaching across the counter. Just two hands resting inches apart. Two breaths sinking in quiet agreement. He looked at me like he understood. Like he respected the space I needed. "I don't know what happens next," I said. "You don't have to." I stood after a while, slowly, and he walked me to the door. "Liam doesn't know," I said quietly. He nodded. "That's your truth to tell. When you're ready." I stepped outside into the sun. It felt warmer than it had in weeks. "Thank you," I said. "For what?" "For seeing me." He smiled then. Not in a way that asked for anything, but in a way that told me he'd be here if I ever came back, and maybe that was enough for now. Coming out wasn't a speech. It wasn't tears or rainbow flags or some perfect orchestrated reveal. It was me sitting across from Liam in the dining hall, my knee bouncing under the table like it had a motor in it, while he shoveled fries into his mouth and complained about his econ professor. And then, between sips of soda and not meeting his eyes, I said, "Hey, there's something I should probably tell you." He looked up, more focused on the ketchup stain on his hoodie than the tremble in my voice. "Yeah? I'm gay." The words hit the air like they'd been waiting there, floating just behind my tongue for years. Liam blinked, set his soda down. "Okay," he said slowly. Yeah, okay." A pause. Too long. I felt like I was going to throw up. "Look, I get if that's weird," I added quickly. "I just felt like I had to say it. I didn't want to keep lying." He stared at me for a second, like he was mentally rewinding the past few months. Then he exhaled, long and low. "Is that why you ghosted me for weeks?" I nodded. "Part of it." Another pause. Then he said, "You thought I'd stop being your friend because of that? I didn't know what you'd do." He shook his head, half laughing. "You're still my brother, man. Don't be an idiot." I almost cried, not because of what he said, but because of how easily he said it, like it didn't change anything. "Well, I mean," he added, raising a brow, "if you ever had a crush on me, I need to retroactively rethink everything about high school." I laughed. "You're safe, I promise." He grinned. "Good. I'm too pretty to be rejected." There was still a weirdness to it, sure, an adjustment period, but the kind that comes from new understanding, not distance. And that was everything. Week later, I met Mr. Morgan for coffee. His idea, something normal. No wine, no power outages. We picked a quiet place off campus. He was already seated at a table by the window, hands wrapped around a ceramic mug, eyes soft when they found me. I sat across from him, my own cup warming my palms. "Hey," I said. "Hey." There was no tension this time, no fear, just a quiet familiarity that settled into the space between us. "How's Liam?" he asked. "He knows about me. Not about us, but he knows." He nodded slowly. "That's big." "Yeah. And how are you?" I didn't answer right away. I just reached across the table and placed my hand over his. There it was again, that silence. But it wasn't uncertain anymore. It was steady, solid. No shame, no apology. His thumb brushed against mine. "I don't know where this goes," I admitted. "But I'm not running from it anymore." That's all I needed to hear. We sat there for an hour, talking about nothing, everything, favorite books, old memories, music he loved that I hated, and vice versa. It wasn't a grand romance. No one was confessing lifelong love or making promises they couldn't keep. It was just a beginning, a real one. When we left the cafe, I didn't check to see who was watching. I didn't feel like I had to hide. And when he opened the door for me and smiled that soft, knowing smile, I realized something. It wasn't about crossing lines or secrets anymore. It was about choosing truth, choosing myself. Weeks passed. Then, months. Liam would still tease me casually, the way he always had, only now with the added bonus of joking about my silver fox phase. I rolled my eyes every time. But it felt good to laugh with him again. I didn't know what would happen with Mr. Morgan in the long run. Maybe it would work. Maybe it wouldn't. But that night by the fire, it had been a spark. Not the kind that burns everything down. The kind that lights a path forward. It wasn't the ending I imagined, but maybe it was the beginning I needed.